Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Fourth and Frames is in the building. I am Rhett Manuel next to my homeboy Drew Scott. Nate Markham, not in the building tonight because he is getting ready to live that island boy life and go to Jamaica. Shout out my boy having a good time. But tonight,
Yes, sir.
we're here to have a good time too. Talk about that week 14 smash, pass, and stash. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get it popping.
This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.
Guys, as we are every week, we are so dang grateful to have you guys locked in with me and Drew and Nate every Wednesday night, Fourth and Frames. Part of the Fantasy and Frames family. And don't forget, you need anything, whether it's Dynasty content, college football content, hockey content, DFS, best ball, draft content, waiver wires, whatever you need. Hop on over to the Fantasy and Frames YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Review anything you see so that way you can get notified anytime new content drops from us over on the YouTube channel. Also, don't forget fantasyandframes.com, the latest in our fantasy football rankings, our latest articles, plays and fades, waivers, IDP, things like that, rankings, news and notes, hot takes, so much more. But Drew, week 14, man. It is coming down to the wire for a lot of us. For most of us, our season is already over. But for others right now, playoff time is getting ready to get cranked up, man. So first, let me just ask you on a personal level. Dude, how are you tonight?
I'm doing great, man. It's good to be here. Miss Nate, obviously. But he's got bigger and better things to be away on. So, hopefully he has a good time on vacation. But no, it feels good to be back, man. Yeah, week 14 is a big week. It's for most leagues, it's the last week of the regular season. I might have a league or two where I'm in a win or win and get in type of scenario for the fantasy playoffs. So this is it's a big one and a messy one too with all the damn bye weeks, man. I'm still 100% convinced that the person that makes the schedule for the NFL hates fantasy football, and you can't convince me otherwise. So it's going to be a fun one to navigate for sure.
No, not a fun one to navigate because as we just start talking about the bye week schedule this week, let's start going through that and just talk about some of these players that are just going to ruin our lives by not being there this week. First off, Baltimore Ravens, Lamar, Derrick Henry. If you play IDP, Kyle Hamilton, Roquan Smith, just a lot of Mark Andrews, just a lot of valuable players that are going to be difference makers going down the stretch, and you just don't get them in the last week of the regular season. That's a tough look. Denver Broncos, one of the surprises of the year in the NFL. Bo Nix has been easily one of the top 7 or 8 quarterbacks in fantasy football over the past 2 months. That's a hard pill to swallow. The Houston Texans, Joe Mixon having an unreal season. Nico Collins is a threat to have a big week on any given week, as is Tank Dell. The Indianapolis Colts, Anthony Richardson seems to have figured it out a little bit more over the past few weeks. Jonathan Taylor. The New England Patriots, Drake May has been kind of fun, but for the most part, it's kind of hit or miss there. And with the Commanders, you had Terry McLaurin and Jaden Daniels having huge seasons. So, it's just a tough week for it to be right before the playoffs. I know what your answer.
Just as we were talking about. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but we're talking about how difficult we've got it. Chris came in to remind us just how good we've got it actually compared to what they have to deal with over on the college side with some of their crazy bye weeks. So, we got to keep ourselves humble here. We don't actually have it as bad as the college guys. But sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to ask you, outside of Lamar, because I know that's your guy, and outside of Derrick Henry, because he's been a real difference maker, which player among these bye week guys do you think is really going to impact the most lineups this week in the most severe way? Being there.
It's got to be Nico for me, man. We just got him back, and he's been playing so well. He's been back to the Nico that we knew before he got hurt in the first place, and now Now we got to deal with this bye week. We have to go without him again. Like you know, a lot of teams, they might have been hurting while he was out for those few weeks, you know, and like they might be playing. I might be speaking from experience here. They might be playing to get into the playoffs this week. And now you got to take Nico out of your lineup again. That one's a tough one for me personally.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that. But then I'm also just looking at it right now. And I mean, over the past several weeks, I mean, let's be honest, this Bo Nix thing that's been kind of wild, man. I mean, he's breathed life into Cortland Sutton again. I mean, Cortland Sutton is a wide receiver 1. Bo Nix is a guy who you are going to plug and play in at one quarterback on a given week. You know, he's now probably a front runner for the offensive rookie of the year. I mean, it's just been a heck of a ride for that guy. And especially in one quarterback formats where, you know, that quarterback position is so important, especially in those 2 quarterbacks as well. I mean, losing a guy like Bo Nix is going to be a difficult pill to swallow. And Chris says that for him, it's the Commanders with Ertz, McLaurin, Jaden Daniels, and Brian Robinson. Yeah, so there are a lot of guys who are super relevant that have made differences in a lot of lineups that just won't be there this week. But you know what? We're all playing the same game. We all have to get over it and figure it out. So that's what we're going to do.
So I'm going to come back to this real quick. Albert, what's up, man? Robert, how's it going, man? The real and only Robert Thomas. Appreciate you guys joining us. So Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, who's your rookie of the year? Or bonus pick, or Brock Bowers, because I think he should be in the discussion too. Who's your rookie of the year right now?
I've got money on Nix right now.
Nix is your guy. I'm still Jaden Daniels, and it's looking like they both might make the playoffs. So it's going to be really interesting because you know the quarterback wins tends to be the tiebreaker, as silly as that is. But I want to say Bowers, but I just know that he's not gonna win, you know, just because it's almost seems like it's turned into a best rookie quarterback award, kind of like the MVP is just the best quarterback award. So I think it's between those 2 guys right now. I still lean Daniels, but we'll see. It'll be interesting.
Yo, have you actually taken a look at that Brock Bowers total stat line for the year? It's 84 receptions, 884 yards, and 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, minus the touchdown department, he's pretty much already done in like 12 games what Laporta did in 16 or 17 games last year, receptions and yards wise. You know, the touchdowns just haven't been there like they were for Laporta last year, but he's put up the receptions and yards in 12 games. You know, he's an animal, man. He's doing that with terrible quarterback play too.
Yeah, so
just imagine whenever the guy gets a quarterback. But I think he should be in consideration for rookie of the year.
Yeah, agreed. And if he's not getting votes, we have a real problem across the league. So, I mean, it's all good. Yeah, let's keep it rolling, though, man. San Francisco 49ers, tough week if you're a fan of the Niners RB room because both Christian McCaffrey and Jordan Mason both placed on IR. I have a preference in terms of these guys, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit later. But are you buying into this Niners running back room right now with those two guys being out for pretty much the remainder of the season?
Yeah, I would. I'll let you talk about, you know, who and why, but I'll just, you know, I'll just say that I agree with you. Yeah, I think it's, you know, the leagues where he was available this week, I put 100% of my fab on him. In some leagues that was enough, and in some leagues it was not because, you know, there were some people that had more fab than I did, and they did the same. So yeah, 100% worth buying it too.
Yeah. Trevor Lawrence placed on IR after that nasty hit on Sunday, which was just
that was brutal.
Yeah, absolutely deplorable. His season is likely over. The Jag season has been over
in the first place.
Yeah, he shouldn't have been out there in the first place. And the Jag season was over to begin with. So probably, even if he was good to go, this is probably just a safety precaution move for them.
I think they're on track to get the number 1 overall pick, ain't they?
Yeah. So I think it's a little bit of gamesmanship on their part. Yeah. So speaking of the Baltimore Ravens, Deontay Johnson, a lot of hype going on behind that trade whenever he was acquired earlier in the year. Not looking great right now, Bob, especially since he's was just suspended 1 game for refusing to enter in the Week 13 loss to the Eagles. The good old conduct detrimental to the team, which is never a great sign for anybody. Yeah. But yeah, his fantasy value was shot even before the suspension. So, man, I just got to ask you, like, in your opinion, what went wrong there? Because we got excited whenever Deontay went over there, and it's like, okay, he's clearly going to be the most talented wide receiver 1 in that room. And then come to find out, he kind of Did he just not able to grasp the playbook? He just rubbed people the wrong way. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't want to speculate and talk on things I don't know. If it really is a locker room thing, then I'll just say that Mike Tomlin deserves some type of like Nobel Peace Prize or like some type of peace award for being able to keep that under wraps. We saw what happened to Antonio Brown after he left. We see what he's doing with Pickens right now, trying to keep him under wraps. Like Tomlin he's worth his weight in gold for keeping wide receivers happy. Just that alone. What we've seen some of these former Steelers receivers, as soon as they leave the Steelers, just lose their mind and fall apart. But luckily for us, from a fantasy standpoint, he was already a 0 for fantasy, so this changes nothing for us. So we don't have to worry about it from that aspect. I like this question. Which rookie is the MVP of the class in 3 years from now? Who's most likely to win an MVP award between Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, JJ McCarthy? It's tight end's probably not going to win an MVP, so we probably need to stick to the quarterbacks here. Of those quarterbacks, which one's the most likely to be MVP in 3 years?
God, that's such a tough question because you're projecting out 3 years from now, and you don't know what these rosters are going to look like.
I know. That's
in
the
3 years. But I mean, the thing right now is this. God, that's tough. Like my instinct says Jaden, because it looks like they have the best trajectory for the long term. But you don't know what Drake May's you don't know what Drake May's roster is going to look like in 3 years, and he's flashed. Bo Nix has certainly flashed, and for the most part, their skill guys have not been great for the most part this season at all.
Like if you told me that the Patriots got Drake May a couple top receivers over the next 3 years, which you would assume would hopefully happen, or like if you told me that the Bears hired Ben Johnson, to be their head coach and an offensive mind to come in and help Caleb, it's hard to know what's going to happen, but. Put a name out there. Which one?
I'll go with Jaden for now.
I'm gonna say Drake May.
Oh, we love it. Oh, I love when we disagree on that. And Chris says that
Deontay, the ultimate fantasy football move. They're out here playing real life fantasy football. We just don't want the other team that we had to play against to get them. I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
Acquire an extra wide receiver. Why? So you can't have them. It's fine. Last news and note before we get into our promo for Underdog. Taysom Hill, pour one out for the big dog. 34 years old, tears his ACL. Was having an unbelievable season, and
he really was.
As a Saints fan, you don't want to say it because you don't realize how old he actually is. But at 34 years old,
I didn't know that until you just said it.
With a torn ACL, you kind of have to think that we might be coming towards the end of the road for him, unless he's some sort of superhuman freak of nature, which it's Taysom Hill.
It's in the cards.
It's in the cards. I did a lot of hating for a long time, but with the year he's had this year, I mean, I just can't hate any longer. At some point, you just have to get out of take lock and tip the cap. So, Taysom, I know you don't watch our show, but hope you get better. Hope you feel better soon. And let's just keep going. And then Chris out here getting upset, saying that's a dirty ass hit from a dirty ass team for the record. Spoken like a true Saints fan, Chris. I love you. So Drew, before we get into it tonight, let's talk about Underdog. And Underdog, formerly known as Underdog Fantasy, y'all have heard it all season. They are giving you free money with the promo code FRAMES. And that is 100% of a deposit match up to $1,000. And if I was Dr. Evil, if I was Dr. Evil from the Austin Powers movie right now, I'd throw up the pinky and do the whole thing. But that's not me. But for all my people out there, don't miss out on all the fun action and head over to Underdog today to lock in that bonus. So, Drew, let's get into it. Let's talk about our Week 14 Smash, Pass, and Stash players. Everybody has heard it all week, but let's just go ahead and get right into it. Let's talk about our Smash players, which are players that are outside the top 20 wide receivers, the top 15 running backs, the top 8 tight ends, or the top 12 quarterbacks in the Fantasy Pros expert consensus rankings. So, Drew, you have a guy to start off. The player that I love, really solid player, in a good system, has a quarterback that people thought was going to fade at some point, and yet here we are toward the end of the year, and his quarterback is still hanging around the top 7 to 8 quarterbacks in fantasy football on a weekly basis. So tell me why Jordan Addison versus the Atlanta Falcons is a smash play this week.
Yeah, it's been an up and down year for Addison, without a doubt. He's missed a couple games. He's had a couple weeks as a wide receiver 1. He's had a couple weeks as a wide receiver 2, and he's had 5 weeks outside of the top 45 receivers as well. So it's kind of been all over the place. But I think we're in for one of Addison's good games this week, though. The Vikings, you mentioned, they get the Falcons defense. They've been the 6th best matchup for wide receivers over the last 6 weeks based on schedule adjusted fantasy points given up to the wide receiver position. And they've also given up 29 fantasy points per game over the last 6 weeks to receivers that line up out wide, which is where Addison has lined up on about 65% of his snaps this season. And, in saying that, there is also this other guy named Justin Jefferson that lines up outside even more often than that. So I'm fully expecting Justin Jefferson's going to get his as well. So that's factored into this. But I'm somewhat depending on the fact that Minnesota secondary, along with Atlanta's, they both have beatable secondaries. And so if you combine that with the Kirk Cousins revenge game narrative, I'm hoping that we get a better effort out of Cousins than what we got last week, and that this ends up being a more high-scoring game, which will equal more pass attempts for both himself and Sam Darnold, hopefully providing enough volume for Jefferson and Addison to have a solid game. I think with the potential to this be an offensive game, I think they have like the 5th or 6th highest over-under on the week. And the matchup that Addison has in front of him, he's a smash play for me this week.
Yeah, man, and I understand that because, like you said, it's been an up and down year. But when you have a guy that is that talented in that sort of matchup, I mean, it's kind of just one of these things where I'm a big proponent of not overthinking your lineups. Like, see your matchups, see your talent, and understand that 9 times out of 10 with sound process, if you just have a guy that is a good player that's in a good matchup, you're going to get results. So I'm a big fan of what you're going with right there to start off for sure. So moving into my first smash player for the week. Drew, I didn't think we'd be here this year, buddy. At any point that I expect to be making this call. But you know what? It's time to pour one out for the GOAT. It's time to pour one out for the Kentucky Wildcats. It's time to pour one out for mayonnaise and coffee, for bananas, for an unsung hero of memery.
What a time to be alive.
What a time to be alive when Will Levis is a smash play against the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. Let's pour one out for him because, Drew, we said this last week. I said this last week before Bryce Young had another good game. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, crazy enough, quarterbacks take time to develop. And just like we said with Bryce Young last week, the narrative doesn't change that much with Will Levis, is that the game is really starting to slow down for him a little bit. And it's not just a 1-2 week sample size. It's been over the past month where Will Levis has averaged 16.8 fantasy points per game, which is a very solid number, especially in a super flex format. But these are the things that are really starting to stand out for me. Over the past month, he's averaged 8.3 yards per attempt, 1.8 touchdowns per game, so practically 2 passing touchdowns per game, and 0.5 interceptions. So he's throwing the ball downfield. They're getting the ball into the end zone through the air, and he's not turning the ball over. And even better is if you were to take these numbers over a 17-game season, Will Levis would be on course to pass for over 4,000 yards and end the year with 30 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. So when we say that Will Levis has made a leap over the past month, I mean, the proof is in the pudding right now because he went from a guy that was a complete afterthought in a bad offense to really just kind of starting to show why everyone had a first-round grade on him at times heading into that 2023 NFL draft, because he's got the arm strength, he's got the ability. It's just a matter of starting to put it all together and then to make things better. Will Levis is on a heater, and what does he get? my man, it's a weekly opportunity to pick on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Shout out Duval. Sure. We love you, but they are the best defense for fantasy quarterbacks to face this season. They are last in the league. So for Will Levis, a guy who we've laughed at, we've picked on, the jokes are played out, but you know what? It's another good spot for a guy who is starting to show himself up in a big way and really putting himself in a position to be a high-end quarterback too on a weekly basis and kind of put himself on some dynasty radars for next season as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if it is enough for him to get a second, another year in Tennessee, or if they go for a quarterback in the NFL draft. That will be interesting to see. The fun thing for Levis with me is that as well as he's playing with what you mentioned, the off-target throw rate is still kind of high. The catchable throw rate is still kind of low, and it hasn't led to turnovers like you mentioned, but you play with fire enough, but it's going to happen. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, he can be kind of like an Aldi's version of Jameis Winston, a little knockoff.
Aldi's like Jameis? Wow.
The turnovers aren't necessarily always a bad thing for fantasy if he keeps getting the ball in his hands and just keeps chucking it, So we've seen this before, just in a better quarterback in Jameis. So Levis is he's good for fantasy, man. It's fun. So I like it. I like the call. And I like that he's been playing well. Obviously, I'm a little biased being a Kentucky guy. I want to see him play well, regardless of how bad he's looked. But yeah, I like it, man.
All right. So real quick, since you mentioned it, let's just say you got to put $100,000 on it, and you have to be right. Is Will Levis a Tennessee Titan next year? Is he the starting quarterback for the Tennessee Titans next year or not?
Like full season or like just starting the year?
So first, yes or no, are they drafting a quarterback?
Let me see. They're seventh in the draft order right now. I mean, I guess it depends on the wins and the losses the rest of the way, but I'll say yes.
Okay. And with that being said, then you have to assume that at some point, unless they're really, really good, he's probably getting replaced at some point in the year, right?
Yeah. I think that there's a decent chance Levis starts the year as the starting quarterback for Tennessee next year, but he might not finish it. I don't know. I just I just said that I'm biased and I want him to do well, but just from what I've seen, I just don't know if he's a long-term NFL starter. Now, whether Tennessee gives him another year or not, your guess is as good as mine. But I think long-term he will end up being replaced, whether that's this year or next year.
All right, fair enough. I like where you're going with that. So, also speaking of places where we're going, seems like since day one we've been doing this show together. This name comes up probably way more than it needs to at some point in our lives. But you know what? He's talented. He's a little bit of a head case. He's definitely runs hot and cold. But you're projecting a hot week for him. So tell me why DeAndre Swift with the smash play against the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah, it might be a little bit more biased because I was one of those DeAndre Swift truthers that just doesn't want to give up. We're right in the middle of the stretch of DeAndre Swift season where it had me concerned enough that I was advising everybody to sell DeAndre Swift earlier this year whenever he was coming off that hot streak where he was a running back one for several weeks in a row because of the matchups that were coming up. But thankfully, there's this one good matchup this week that's been sandwiched between four really difficult ones. Swift is coming off weeks where he was the running back 22 and the running back 30 the last 2 weeks against Minnesota and Detroit. And he's got two more matchups against Minnesota and Detroit in weeks 15 and week 16 right after this, following this matchup. But this week, he gets a 49ers defense that's been the fourth best matchup for fantasy running backs over the last 6 weeks. And even though the fantasy finishes haven't been there the last couple weeks, Swift is still the guy in this backfield. Coming out of their week 7 bye, and after the Bears had traded Khalil Herbert, Roschon Johnson has had 18 carries, and then Swift has gotten the other 88. He's getting the run, and he's been the better runner as well. He's had more yards per carry, a higher explosive run percentage, a higher missed tackles forced per attempt as well. And even though neither one is really overly involved in the passing game, Swift has had more targets too. So Unfortunately, the one place where Swift does lose work is at the goal line. Roshan's handled over 70% of the carries over the last 6 weeks inside the 5-yard line. So we're going to need Swift to rack up the yards, but the 49ers have given up the 11th highest rushing yards per game over the last 6 weeks. So I think the opportunity is going to be there. Given the matchup, given Swift's role in this backfield, his ability to break a big play whenever the defense will allow it. I think he's a smash play this week, but I hope you enjoy it, because it's probably going to be the last time you're going to feel good about starting him until he plays Seattle week 17. It's going to be a rough couple weeks after this one, but I do think he's a smash play this week.
Rough sledding coming up, and of course it happens with all of our fantasy guys. But speaking of one of our guys on the show, let's go to our boy Ismail, who has a question. He's asking us to pick one quarterback between Justin Herbert, Caleb Williams, and Aiden O'Connell in a PPR must-win, and between us, the 6 or 7 guys is decided by points. He's asking us to he thanks us for our help. So, Drew, Herbert, Caleb, and O'Connor, what you got?
Let me pull up my stuff real quick. Did he say if it's 4 or 6 points per passing touchdown? He didn't. Okay, I don't know if it's going to make a difference, to be honest. Yeah, no, it's not. I don't think it's going to make a difference for me. I would go with Herbert against Kansas City. Kansas City's defense has actually taken a little bit of a step back the last few weeks. So I feel better about this game possibly being able to put up some points as I would have, because, the Chargers and the Chiefs, they both have solid defenses, but they also both have solid offenses with really good quarterbacks. And so the matchup against San Francisco isn't a great one necessarily for Caleb. It's not the worst thing in the world, but Aiden O'Connell technically has the best matchup, but I just can't play Aiden O'Connell over Herbert or Caleb Williams. Like I couldn't imagine leaving one of those guys on my bench and playing Aiden O'Connell in a must-win game. Personally, that's just me personally. But if you want to just look at the matchups, O'Connell technically has the best matchup. But I would go with Justin Herbert.
Yeah, I think I agree with that, and I also agree with you on the same thing, where it's kind of like it's hard to see where you start AOC over either of those guys out of sheer upside. But you know what? Stranger things have happened. So at the end of the day, always say trust your matchups. But Justin Herbert has that nice balance between a Chiefs defense that has been more gettable over the past couple of weeks. We saw Bryce Young exploit him a couple of weeks back. And, Justin Herbert and Ladd McConkey are starting to work up a pretty good connection at this point. So, it's hard to go against Justin Herbert, especially with the way he's been playing over the past few weeks. So, Ismail, we appreciate your question, bud. Thanks for locking in with us tonight. And speaking of guys we want to lock in with, we kind of gave us
real quick before you move on. Appreciate the $2 super chat as well, Ishmael. Thank you, man. Appreciate the support for real. But yeah, just to add some more context real quick to this, over the last 6 weeks, Chiefs have been the 13th best matchup for fantasy quarterbacks. So O'Connell technically has the best matchup, but I think Herbert is the best combination of actual quarterback talent and matchup, whatever all things are equal. But appreciate the $2, man. Appreciate your support. Appreciate you tuning in, and good luck this week.
Yeah, appreciate you, man, for sure. So getting into my second smash play, Drew, you kind of teased it at the top of the show. The Niners kind of going through it right now. Injury wise, CMC and Jordan Mason both go on the IR. They claim Izzy Abanikanda off of waivers, and people are kind of saying, oh, is this going to be the guy that makes a difference? For me, I think the guy that's going to make a difference for your fantasy teams coming down the stretch is already in the room in San Francisco, and that's Isaac Guerendo playing the Chicago Bears this week. And look, Guerendo has had a very small sample size this season, and speculating anything about how successful he's going to be is nothing but a dart throw, for lack of a better way of putting it. But he's the next man up. We know he's fast. We know he's a great fit for this outside zone scheme that they run. And when he has gotten the opportunities this year, first off, he's averaging 5.9 yards per carry. And when he's gotten those opportunities, when he's gotten significant work, it's been in 2 games this year. He was the running back 24 one week and the running back 12 on the week when he played over 60% of snaps against the Dallas Cowboys. He had 14 carries for 84 yards and a touchdown, averaged over 6 yards a carry. And he also had 3 receptions in that game as well, too. So there is a possibility with Garindo that you have a guy who can do a little bit of everything. And I can remember during last offseason, having some conversations, doing some offseason shows. Our boy Jack Lucene came in, and I had some talk with him, and he was really big on Garindo. And, in my mind, we kind of do the little eye roll thing where it's like, yeah, okay, flashy combine guy comes in and does his thing. But at the end of the day, what's he really going to be? Then once you realize that he gets drafted by the 49ers, we talk about this all the time, how some organizations are just better at scouting certain positions. You think of the Green Bay Packers, you think of them scouting quarterbacks. You think of the Pittsburgh Steelers, you think of wide receivers. Over the past several years, it's kind of become with the San Francisco 49ers, if they're drafting a running back, your ears are at least perking up a little bit because the hit rate has been pretty dang high outside of the exceptions of Trey Sermon and Tyrion Davis-Price. But you know what? Those two guys, you can't win them all, even if you are as good at scouting running backs as the San Francisco 49ers are. And with the Chicago Bears, they are 21st in the league in stopping the run against fantasy running backs. So it is a good matchup. Garindo is locked in as the running back 19 in the expert consensus rankings this week, which I feel might be a little low because with the way the Niners like to run their offense, I think there is a real chance for him to be a high-end running back 2 or a low-end running back 1 this week with that matchup.
Yeah, I don't even know how much of it is really like them hitting on running backs in the draft versus just how good the system is that makes the running backs look good too. It might be a little combination of both, but yeah, I mean, to your point, even over the last 6 weeks, they're 24th, against running backs, so they've been an even better matchup over the last 6 weeks compared to season long. So yeah, to your point, he should step into a pretty heavy workload, and the matchup looks pretty solid on paper. So as long as Purdy's healthy, the offense is moving like usual. I think Garindo should be in for a I saw a lot of league winner get thrown around about Garindo. I don't know if I'm quite there because the 49ers season might be like 1 or 2 losses away from just exploding with all the injuries they've dealt with and where they're sitting at in the standings. But I do think he's going to be like a solid running back 2. That's kind of where I'm at. Like, I think he'll be a solid running back 2 rest of season. But to be able to get that off waivers in week 14 and immediately be able to plug him into your lineup in a good matchup, that's great. So I'm with you. He's a great play this week.
It's about all you can ask for, really and truly.
Yeah.
So recapping those smash players Drew and I talked about this week. Drew said Jordan Addison is going to smash against the Atlanta Falcons. I said Will Levis was going to smash against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then he went to DeAndre Swift at the San Francisco 49ers. And then I went in the same game and went Isaac Garindo against the Chicago Bears. So, Drew, let's get into those smash guys, those pass guys, those players that are inside the top 35 wide receivers, the top 20 running backs, the top 12 tight ends, and the top 20 quarterbacks in the Fantasy Pros ECR rankings that we expect to underperform this week compared to their expert consensus ranking. So, Drew, I'm curious of where you're going with this one. I know the matchup is tough, but I know there might be someone who people are starting to say could be lurking in the background. So, why do you feel like Chuba Hubbard is a pass this week? Is it just the matchup? Is it the rookie behind him, Jonathan Brooks? What's going on there, man?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. Honestly, you laid it out. It is a combination of those two things. It's the matchup against Philadelphia, and it's Jonathan Brooks' increased role in this offense. Chuba, the Panthers, they got to go up against an Eagles defense. It's been the 4th toughest matchup for running backs over the last 6 weeks, and that's including matchups against Baltimore, the Rams, teams that typically run the ball pretty well, have decent success doing so. Not so much against the Eagles lately. They have been run and pass across the board. The Eagles defense has just been playing out of their mind. And on top of that, you said it, Jonathan Brooks, he played a season high 21% of snaps in his second game back last week since being activated from IR. And 21% of snaps doesn't sound like a lot. And I mean, it's not a lot. Snaps wise, it's not a lot, but they were making it a point to get Jonathan Brooks the ball whenever he was on the field. He had 6 carries and he had another 3 receptions on 3 targets and ended up with only 3 less opportunities than Chuba had last week. And last week was also the first time since week 7 that Chuba wasn't targeted in the passing game at all. And I'm not sure how many favors the fumble that he had in overtime did to him either. I don't think that he'll get completely like put in the doghouse and not play this week, but Brooks was already trending up, and then you had the fumble. And I think they're going to continue to get Brooks slightly more involved. Like, I think the snaps will probably go up again this week, I would imagine. I don't think it's going to – I still think it'll be a solid 70-30 in Chuba's favor, but then you have the matchup on top of the fact that he's not going to be getting the workload that he's been getting here lately. So I know lineup decisions are a pain in the ass this week with all of the bye weeks and the injuries. But given the matchup against Philadelphia, given Brooks' growing involvement in the offense, he's a pass for me, and I'm trying to get him out of my lineup if at all possible this week.
Yeah, and I mean, you didn't even talk about that much about this Eagles defense, which is, by the way, I mean, I'm kind of mad at the New Orleans Saints for last offseason because apparently we didn't know what we had in a guy like Zach Bond, who was on pace for, I believe, 170 tackles this season. I mean, we saw the Cooper DeJean, that hit he put on Derrick Henry last week. I mean, I don't think we've ever seen anyone, much less the DB, do that to Derrick Henry in all his time in the league. So, I mean, this Eagles defense is physical, man. They're tough there. They're tough to deal with on a given basis. And with the Carolina Panthers, I mean, God bless them. They've shown signs over the past couple of weeks. But I mean,
Bryce Young's been playing well, man. I feel bad for him because he's got a tough matchup in front of him, but he's been playing really well the last few weeks. And I know you kind of been driving the Bryce Young train on this show. And that did not look like that was a rough look at the beginning of the year. But to your credit, you were also you acknowledged that at the beginning of the year, but then to your credit, you shone some light on him at the beginning of the turnaround and kind of talked about, you've already given Bryce Young his flowers on this show to where I think a lot of people probably don't know how well Bryce Young has been playing. But to your credit, if you've listened to our show recently, thanks to Rhett, you do know how well he's been playing. So shout out to Bryce Young. I can't imagine in the NFL world that we would ever declare time of death on a quarterback too early. That doesn't sound like something that we would do.
No, that never happens in the league at all.
It never happens. So that's not a thing at all. But to your credit, you've been riding this thing out, and it's looked good the last few weeks. But I just if you are a Bryce fan, just close your eyes this weekend. Just don't watch.
Yeah. And if he plays well, then I mean, hey, we might really have something here.
We're cooking with hot grease at that point. If he torches Philadelphia, he's cooking with hot grease at that point.
So you're talking about Chuba Hubbard as they pass. I'm going to go ahead and just talk about a guy who, we talk about hit or miss guys all year. And I mean, everybody has up weeks and everybody has down weeks. But can you think of a more volatile receiver this year than Jaden Young, as a guy who was heading into the season, was seen as a guy who could potentially be a high-end guy? Like,
you're talking about Jaden Reed, right? You said
Jaden Reed.
Jaden Young. Okay. You said Jaden Young. I got the Bryce Young and the Jaden Reed wires crossed.
Jaden Reed, and he has the Detroit Lions this week. And he's coming off of a 2-touchdown week last week. But, guys, you've heard it here before. You're going to hear it again. You're going to hear it from any fantasy analyst worth their salt. And say it with me right now. Drew, you can complete my sentence. We don't chase stats. We chase what?
Usage
and opportunity. That's correct, my man.
Yep.
And so Jaden Reed over the past 3 weeks has seen his fantasy value bloated in a big way, because he's had touchdowns in 2 of the past 3 weeks. However, in those same 3 weeks, he's had 26 or less receiving yards and 6 or fewer targets in those 3 weeks. Matter of fact, in the past 3 weeks, he's only had 11 targets over the past 3 weeks. So my question is this. With Jaden Reed being ranked as the wide receiver 19 in the ECR this week, against a team like the Detroit Lions, what exactly are we buying into? Are we buying into a pie-in-the-sky touchdown possibility? Like, are we putting all of our hopes in the fact that Jaden Reed might get into the end zone? Because if we are, we're making a mistake and we should be better than that. Detroit is too good. Green Bay has been too smart of a team because, let's be honest, I don't know if anybody wants to really get into a shootout with the Detroit Lions. So Green Bay has absolutely zero incentive to be putting the ball up this week against the Detroit Lions. This isn't a passing game for them with as well as Josh Jacobs has played all season. So the move, if you have Green Bay Packers in your lineup, if you have Jaden Reed and you have Josh Jacobs, you're sitting Jaden Reed and you are starting Josh Jacobs because of this following thing. Jaden Reed's bloated fantasy value over the past 3 weeks, and Josh Jacobs being in another smash spot where he has been the bell cow for this offense this year makes Jaden Reed a very, very strong stay away play for me this week.
It's a very fair point. If I was to play devil's advocate, I would say that while Detroit's defense is improved compared to last year, they are susceptible to slot receivers, which is where Jaden Reed lines up a decent amount. They give up the 5th most, I believe is what it was. Yeah, they give up the 5th most points per game to slot receivers over the last 6 weeks. Jaden Reed did go for over 100 yards last time he played Green Bay, or last time he played Detroit, my apologies. And then Detroit over the last 6 weeks, they've been the toughest run defense as far as matchup for fantasy running backs. And so a tough matchup for Josh Jacobs, and ideally, in theory, a good matchup for Jaden Reed. But to your point, the usage is kind of all over the place. So it is a gamble for sure. If I was to play devil's advocate, last time I played devil's advocate on one of your past picks, it was Anthony Richardson, and that was the game before he got benched, and you nailed it. So that's the devil's advocate choice for why I think he is where he is in the ECR. I do have him a couple spots lower. I'm with you in that aspect, but I think that's why he is where he is.
And I hear you. And I mean, look, this is why I keep you around, Drew, because sometimes I just come out of pocket and say some absolutely ridiculous.
It wasn't no out of pocket ridiculous stuff though. You have your reasoning and your research behind it. I'm just playing the other side, but you weren't out of pocket or out of reason or anything like that though.
But you know what? Sometimes I have been in the past, but nonetheless, we're talking Chuba Hubbard, we're talking Jaden Reed, and now for your second pass player, I mean, you about to pick on a legend right now, so I'm going to just tell you to tread lightly. But yeah, you don't feel good about it, but you have to give people good information. So tell us why Keenan Allen against the Niners is a bad play this week.
Yeah, well, whenever the Niners and Bears play each other, we'll find out if it's good information or not, because I can have all the reasons in the world, but that doesn't mean it's going to work out. But look, Keenan Allen, he's been a machine the last couple of weeks. He has 14 receptions over the last two weeks, almost 160 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns. Like he's been a top 5 receiver back-to-back weeks after not having a top 5 finish the entire year up to that point. He's been on fire, but unfortunately, I don't think the trend continues this week. Like if you know, after 2 games he was heating up. I don't think he's getting on fire. I think we're stopping it heating up. If you know, you know. I already talked about how I like DeAndre Swift this week because of the beatable 49ers run defense, but I can't say the same for the passing defense. Over the last 6 weeks, they've been the 3rd toughest matchup for fantasy receivers, and while they might not have had to do much last week against Buffalo in that snowstorm that they were in, there wasn't a lot of passing going on in that game other than Josh Allen passing it to himself. They still had tough tests against Tampa, Seattle, and Green Bay during that sample size as well. So it's not like it was like a cupcake road to being, this top passing defense. But they've been especially tough against slot receivers. They're only giving up 7.7 fantasy points per game over the last 6 weeks. The receivers that line up in the slot, which is where Keenan Allen lined up over 55% of his snaps the last 2 weeks whenever he was a wide receiver 1 in the slot. So he's still moving around, but over half his snaps are in the slot. So if the Bears offense are going to have success this week, I'm expecting it to come from the running game with Swift. And then, like I've already talked about, I think DJ Moore, he lines up on the outside a little bit more, and he's been playing well. He would be the Bears receiver that I'd want to bet on this week. I'd love to say Rome Odunze because he lines up outside more often than Keenan Allen does as well, but it's hard to have much confidence, in Odunze at this point with what we've seen so far. But I think that the Bears players I'm betting on this week are DJ Moore and DeAndre Swift, and just personally given the matchup, how the 49ers secondary has been playing, especially against receivers that line up primarily in the slot. Keenan Allen, I know it's been a hot couple weeks, but he's a pass for me this week.
And look, one of the things I love about your research, and you come with it on a weekly basis, is if we need to get in the weeds on something, if we need to talk slot rates, we need to talk outside rates, we need to talk first target, first read shares. Drew, you're on top of it. So, you are the dude when it comes to these analytic things. And you're right. Over the past couple of weeks, watching the Thanksgiving Day game, there was one of those routes where Keenan Allen just absolutely cooked homeboy on a double move in the red zone. And I was just like, man, it's unbelievable how good he is. But you're right, though. At the same time, you just kind of just have to understand that when you have a team, also at the Niners, you can't discount the fact that their backs are a little bit up against the wall at this point. They might be coming out playing with a little more fire this week and put some heat on Caleb Williams. So with all those things factoring in, you kind of have to go with the fact that the slot rate has not been good against the Niners, and it makes it a solid call this week. I like it, man.
Appreciate you.
So moving into my final pass play for the week, let's talk Evan Ingram, and let's talk him against the Tennessee Titans. He heads into the week as the ECR tight end 10. And Drew, if we're going to be honest, I've said chase usage, chase opportunity. And if you look at Evan Ingram over the past month, the opportunity has been there. He's gotten 34 targets over the past month, which is a very healthy number, especially at the tight end position. Absolutely. But we're still dealing with two very, very important factors. First off, the Jags stink, and so they really don't have anything to play for.
Yeah,
and second, Trevor Lawrence being out for the season means who do we get back in the saddle this week, baby?
I want to say the who. Instead of who Mike Jones, who Mac Jones, but I feel like that's disrespect to Mike Jones. So I'll let you give the other nickname for the quarterback.
McCorkle?
There it is. Yeah.
I love McCorkle. Anyway, but yeah, Evan Ingram, like we said, 34 targets over the past month. At the same time, in getting 34 targets over the past month, he has only averaged 10.1 fantasy points per game in full PPR formats over the past month. Now, 10 fantasy points per game at tight end, you're going to do worse. I will concede that wholeheartedly.
Sure.
But in that same month, on 34 targets, Evan Ingram has averaged 6.7 yards per reception over the past month on these 34 targets. And for the season, according to Player Profiler, he is averaging 3 fantasy points below what's been expected for him for the season. So what are we looking at with Evan Ingram heading into this week against the Tennessee Titans? You're looking at a guy for as efficient and target heavy as he was last season. He's been inefficient this season, playing with a bad QB at a position where red zone touches and red zone touchdowns and receiving touchdowns make or break your value. And Evan Ingram has had exactly 1 receiving touchdown so far this season. So I love the usage. But the thing is, at the same time, not all usage is all usage is good usage, but not all usage is necessarily productive usage. And Evan Ingram,
it's not all created equal.
Yeah, not all usage is created equal. And Evan Ingram over the past month, despite those 34 targets, let's just call it what it is. He's kind of sucked at what he's doing lately. So no thank you on Evan Ingram this week.
Yeah, I'm with you. Looking at ECR, at least whenever I was looking at it, Kate Otten was behind him. I'd rather play Kate Otten against Vegas this week. Will Dissly, especially if there's no Lad McConkey, I'd rather play Will Dissly over Evan Ingram this week. He's behind. He's behind him as well. So, there's a couple other guys well behind Evan Ingram in the expert consensus rankings this week that I'd rather play above him. So yeah, I'm with you, man. It's hard to trust him with old McCoracle back there.
But you know what? We can always trust the fact that when it comes to Mac Jones, saying his name is always going to be a good time. So we appreciate you for that, Mac. So wrapping up our pass players for the week, Drew is going to pass on Chuba Hubbard against the Philadelphia Eagles and Keenan Allen against the San Francisco 49ers. And I'm passing on Jaden Reed at Detroit and Evan Ingram at Tennessee. So, Drew, we got time for once this week, baby. Let's talk stash players. And stash players are
trying to get Nate out of here.
Yeah. It is a Christmas miracle, ladies and gentlemen. And just to remind you, a stash player is someone that we like who is rostered in under 50% of sleeper leagues. So, Drew, we mentioned the San Francisco 49ers running back room.
Mm-hmm.
We mentioned that we both like Isaac Guerrero. But you have a stash who was claimed off of waivers this week, a guy who heading into the draft season last year, everybody loved the athleticism, but it kind of just hasn't worked out yet. So why is Izzy Abanikanda a guy that you're willing to stash this late in the year?
If this season's taught us anything, is that it's probably a good idea to roster the 49ers handcuff running back, and then you should also probably roster the handcuff to the handcuff as well. So with CMC, Jordan Mason, they're both out. I'm with you on the Guerrero call. I fully expect him to be the guy, but I have no idea between Patrick Taylor or Izzy who the handcuff is to own. But Izzy's the guy I'm guessing on. He's the one that I'm throwing on my bench if I can. He seems like a Shanahan type of running back. He's got the solid size. He's 5'10". He's over 210, like 215 pounds. And he's freaking fast, man. He had a 4.41 and a 4.27 40 at the combine. Like, the dude flies. And Patrick Taylor, he's not a slouch either. I mean, he's 6'2", 217. I don't think he has quite the same speed as Izzy, but both of these guys, Izzy and Patrick Taylor, on sleeper and redraft leagues, they're 4% rostered. So, like, throw a dart, take your pick. Pay attention to the report, see if we get any clarification on who will be playing backup this week. It'll be one of those two guys. I just don't know which one, but either one, honestly, is worth stashing if we get any kind of clarity who the backup is. But Izzy's the one that I'm throwing my chips in personally. I'm throwing on the end of my bench if I have the room.
And I mean, rightfully so. Like we said, if it's all about finding guys who have juice this late in the year, and like you said, if you are getting claimed off of waivers for the San Francisco 49ers, there's a chance that Kyle Shanahan sees a little bit of juice in your legs. So, with a guy like Abanikanda, who we haven't really seen in tape last year in the college stuff, I kind of saw him. He might have a little bit of trouble identifying a hole and being patient and getting there. But the good thing about this system is that you are pretty much taking one cut and you're going. So it could work well. It could work well for his skill set. So I like the call there. And as for my stash player, I know I said we don't like chasing touchdowns. But Drew,
this is so good though.
Sometimes exceptions have to be made.
Yeah.
And in the case of Nick Westbrook-Ikini, who is rostered in 29% of sleeper leagues, I mean,
it's crazy.
That I don't think I've ever seen a stat line like this in my life. Nick Westbrook-Ikini has 20 receptions this year and 8 touchdowns. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know that a 40% touchdown rate is sustainable, but it's certainly fun. And I'm going to tell you this, is that in a week like this where you are looking for absolutely any edge that you can with all of these bye weeks, if you need some juice, if you're trying to make the playoffs and you just kind of need a guy who could potentially give you one of those big plays, I mean, you're going to do a lot worse than Nick Westbrook-Ikini. I mean, we could just go through the last 5 games for him, and it's just going to read
so
as it is the most absurd thing you've ever seen in your life. Against the Patriots on November 3rd, 5 receptions on 6 targets, 50 yards at a score. All right, that's a pretty normal game. Against the Chargers, 3 receptions, 3 targets, 31 yards. Okay, pretty normal. Minnesota, this is where it starts to get absurd. 2 receptions on 6 targets for 117 yards and a 98-yard touchdown.
Okay.
The Texans, 2 receptions on 5 targets for 48 yards and a touchdown with a long of 38. And last week, 8 targets. That's not bad. We'll take that. 3 receptions, 61 yards, 2 touchdowns. All 3 of his receptions go for first downs. So, guys, I'm not saying you should expect this guy to come in and smash play on a weekly basis. But you know what? If you're desperate and you need a little bit of juice in these bye weeks and you need to get over the top and you're trying to make the playoffs and you need to chase some points, maybe it's point difference you need to get after. You're going to do a hell of a lot worse chasing upside than Nick Westbrook this week, guys. I'm just putting that out there for you.
He's the wide receiver over the from week 8 on. He's the wide receiver 22 in points per game in PPR. He has more points per game than Justin Jefferson since week 8. It's absolutely not sustainable. There's no shot, no chance. But on top of that, he also has the Titans. The Titans receivers also have the easiest strength of schedule from weeks 14 to week 17. He's on this insane stretch.
Happening.
And he also has the easiest strength of schedule for the rest of the year, for the rest of the fantasy year that we care about for receivers. It is so stupid, but we're here. The fact you said he's owned in 20% of leagues?
29% of leagues.
Yeah, even if it's not sustainable and it's not going to happen, the ownership shouldn't be that low at redraft leagues. There's no way that you've got that many people on your bench that you can't roster Westbrook-Ikhine at this point.
And guys,
it's absurd. Yeah. The run he's on is hilarious.
It's funny, and you know what? Here's the thing about fantasy football that we too often forget about trying to be super serious analysts. This shit is supposed to be fun. So at the end of the day, if you have a guy who is currently on a 40% touchdown rate heater, I can't think of anyone you want to root for more on your roster on a weekly basis than rostering Nick Westbrook-Ikhine right now. So go stash him. Enjoy the ride.
Great meme. If it continued, it would be an incredible meme. But you just know that there's so many people that has watched what he's done over the last few weeks, and they're putting him in their lineup this week. And this is 100% the week he's going to go for 1 reception for 6 yards and no touchdowns. This is the week that's going to happen. But
proceed with caution, absolutely.
But it's just going to happen. It's how fantasy works. It's how it's a cruel world. But he should the roster percentage shouldn't be that low though.
Yeah. So Drew, before we get out of here, anything else you want to say, man?
No, I got a plays and fades article coming out probably tomorrow or Friday for Fantasy and Frame, so that'll be on their socials and the Twitter world and things like that. I'm doing plays and fades for the month of December for the offensive side of the football, because here at Fantasy and Frames we are diversified and we cover the offensive and defensive side of the ball. So I got that article coming Thursday or Friday. No, other than that, just here hanging out with you every week, which wouldn't trade it for the world, man.
Yeah, man. Same. I just wrapped up my plays and fades month, so have fun with that. It's a little bit of a grind, baby. We're passing on the torch, but you know what? If there's somebody who I can trust to give people good advice, it's going to be Drew Scott. So, appreciate being here with you.
Appreciate you,
as always, my friend. And Nate, even if you're watching or not tonight, come back in one piece. We miss you, buddy. But have fun in Jamaica at the same time. Don't come back with silly cornrows. We're gonna laugh at you. But
before we get out of here, before you hit the rest of your outro, I don't mean to kill your momentum, but For those of you that are still watching, we have a familiar face coming back next week that I don't want to wait until next week to tell you. I'm so excited. I want to tell you right now. Chris Battistill, I don't know if you're still watching, but obviously, we know we are extremely excited that he's coming back now that the college fantasy football season has wrapped itself up. He has been so balls deep in college fantasy football that he has time to come up for air, pause, and come hang out with us. So next week, the first week of the typical first week of the fantasy playoffs, we're bringing in the reinforcements, and we're getting Chris Battistill on here with us. So make sure to come back next week, and we'll have the full game together with hopefully Nate will be back. Then we'll have Chris. We'll have the whole shebang going on next week. So make sure to come out, hang out for that.
Yeah, the big homie's coming back to slum it with us for 1 week, so we're excited about it. So
100%.
Before we get out of here, guys, don't forget on social media at Fantasy and Frames. My man Drew is at Drew3MR. Nate, who is not here, is at Nate Markham. I am at R Manual Sports. We are Fantasy and Frames, and ladies and gentlemen, we gone. Toodles.
This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential